My sister-in-law's DNA kit to ruin my marriage backfired and her son's test revealed shocking truths about her own family. Vanessa always hated me. From the moment I married Emily, she made it her mission to break us apart. So when she gifted us DNA kits at a family barbecue, I knew she was up to something. She wanted to expose a lie, to create a scandal that would end my marriage for good. But Vanessa never expected her own trap to backfire. When the results came in, she eagerly ripped open my report, waiting for a bombshell revelation that would turn my wife against me. Instead, the real secret was in her son's test. The moment she read it, her smug grin vanished. Her hand started shaking. Her husband's face went pale. Her son? Shattered beyond repair. Because the truth that came out wasn't about me. It was about her. And it was far worse than anything she had imagined. As the family imploded and secrets erupted in the most horrifying way possible, Vanessa lost everything. Her husband. Her son. Her entire reputation. She tried to destroy my life, but instead, she destroyed her own. Fire watch until the end, because some secrets should never be uncovered. Fire. I've always known that Vanessa, my sister-in-law, hated my guts. She never outright said it, no, she was far too calculated for that, but I could see it in the way her smile tightened when I walked into a room, the way she always had some backhanded compliment ready, the way she'd lean in just a little too close to Emily, my wife, whenever we had an argument, whispering things I was never meant to hear. She wanted Emily to leave me. And she'd been trying for years to make it happen. That's why, when she sprung the DNA kits on us at the annual family barbecue, I just knew, she was up to something. Come on, it'll be fun. Vanessa chirped, flashing her too-perfect smile as she placed the neatly packaged boxes on the picnic table. The summer sun gleamed off the plastic, making them look more sinister than they should have. She clapped her hands together like a game show host, eyes flitting between Emily, myself, and the rest of the family as if she were waiting for applause. DNA kits, I said, raising an eyebrow. That's new. Vanessa grinned. I thought it would be a great way to celebrate our roots. You know, get a little insight into where we come from. Maybe find some long-lost cousins. I glanced at Emily, who was already unboxing hers, oblivious to the daggers her sister was throwing my way. I sighed. Here we go. Vanessa had pulled some schemes before, but this? This was ambitious. She wasn't just trying to stir up some family drama this time, she was playing the long game. I could see it in the way she kept side-eyeing me, waiting for some kind of reaction, as if she already knew something I didn't. I smirked and leaned back in my chair. Well, if it means we finally get to figure out what the hell kind of demon blood runs through your veins, Vanessa, count me in. The table erupted in laughter, everyone except Vanessa. For a split second, I saw her mask crack. Just a second. Then, just as quickly, she was all smiles again, pushing a kit toward me like it was a loaded gun. Oh, don't worry, Jake, she said sweetly. I'm sure your results will be the most interesting. The way she said it sent a cold shiver down my spine. But I played along. I swabbed my cheek, sealed the vial, and tossed it in the mail the next morning, completely unaware that Vanessa had already made her move. You see, Vanessa had connections. A friend in a genetics lab who owed her a favor. Someone who could adjust results if necessary. And she had a plan, a perfect, twisted little plan. She had rigged my test to show something shocking. Infidelity. A hidden child. A double life. Something so big that Emily would never look at me the same way again. Something that would finally make Emily leave me. Vanessa sat back, waiting. Waiting for the results to come in. Waiting for the bomb to go off. What she didn't know, what she never could have predicted, was that she had just wired the detonator to herself. And the explosion? Oh, it was going to be so much worse than she had ever imagined. A week later, the results came in. I didn't even think about them at first. I was in the middle of a work meeting when I got the email notification. Your DNA test results are ready, but honestly, I had already forgotten about it. Vanessa, on the other hand? She hadn't forgotten. We were at another family gathering, this time at Vanessa and her husband Daniel's house. The whole thing had a forced, artificial air to it, like Vanessa had invited us over just to orchestrate the perfect setting for my downfall. She was practically bouncing as she set up her laptop on the kitchen island, gathering everyone around like she was about to reveal a game-changing stock tip. "Oh my God, you guys, this is going to be so exciting," she chirped, her voice dripping with barely contained glee. Emily leaned in beside me, grinning. "I wonder if I have Viking ancestry." I snorted. "I just hope mine doesn't say I'm secretly a lizard person." Vanessa laughed, but it was too sharp, too eager, like she was laughing at me, not with me. And then she opened my results. She was leaning in so close to the screen that I swear she could have licked it. She clicked on my name, her smug grin practically touching her ears. I expected some sort of dramatic gasp. A triumphant, aha. Maybe even tears of fake betrayal as she turned to Emily with her Oscar-worthy performance. Instead, nothing. No gasp. No dramatic outburst. Just silence. Vanessa's entire face shifted in real time. Her grin? Gone. Her eyebrows? Twitching in confusion. Her skin? Paling by the second. I leaned over and glanced at the screen. And there it was. My results. 100% boring. No hidden kids. No long-lost relatives. No shocking betrayals. Just me. Exactly who I said I was. I let out a low chuckle. "Damn, Vanessa. You look disappointed." Emily giggled beside me, nudging my arm. "Guess you're exactly as predictable as you always say you are." Vanessa was frozen, eyes locked on the screen like she was waiting for it to reload with the correct data. This wasn't part of the script. This wasn't supposed to happen. I savored the moment, watching the realization dawn on her face. Her whole plan, all of it, had just collapsed. She blinked, visibly trying to recover, and cleared her throat. "Well, that's good news, right?" She gave Emily a forced smile. "Now you know for sure that Jake is exactly who he says he is." Emily, bless her, still had no idea Vanessa had been trying to destroy our marriage. She just nodded cheerfully, completely unaware of the war going on inside Vanessa's skull. But then, the real fun began. Because Vanessa clicked back to the results page, still flustered, still trying to regain control. And that's when she saw her son's results. Tyler, her 16-year-old son, had also taken the test. And something was very, very wrong. I wasn't even looking at the screen at first. I was too busy enjoying Vanessa's failure. But when I saw her face drain of color, when I saw her eyes widen in horror, when I heard her sharp inhale of breath, I knew. Something bad had just happened. This has to be a mistake," she stammered. Her hands were shaking as she scrolled through the page. She double-checked the numbers. Then triple-checked. Her breath came faster. I peered over her shoulder. Tyler was watching, too, oblivious to the fact that his entire existence was about to implode. And then, finally, I saw it. Tyler's DNA results. And the glaring, impossible truth they revealed. Tyler's father wasn't Daniel. Tyler's father wasn't even related to Daniel. He wasn't a match at all. "Oh, my God," I muttered. And then, as if on cue, Daniel walked into the kitchen, holding a beer. "What's going on?" he asked casually, before noticing the look on his wife's face. The whole room tensed. And I swear to God, I saw Vanessa's soul leave her body. I don't think I'd ever seen a room go completely silent like that before. Not awkward silence. Not tense silence. This was something different. This was the kind of silence that happens right before a bomb goes off. Tyler, Vanessa's 16-year-old son, had just snatched the DNA results out of her trembling hands. He wasn't stupid. He wasn't some clueless kid who could be lied to and distracted with a cookie. He was a teenager, which meant he had years of experience detecting bullsh*T, especially from his mother. And right now? His BS meter was off the charts. He looked down at the report, eyes scanning the text with the casual curiosity of someone who doesn't yet realize their entire world is about to collapse. Then he saw it. And the second he did, I watched his whole face change. The casual curiosity in his expression froze, his brows pulling together in a tight, confused knot. His lips parted slightly, like he wanted to say something but his brain hadn't caught up yet. "Wait," he mumbled, holding the paper up closer to his face. "What the hell is this?" Everyone at the table was still dead silent. I could hear the wind outside. The faint hum of the fridge. Even the slight shuffling of feet from some distant relative who clearly wanted to disappear into the floor. Tyler's head snapped up, his wide eyes locking onto Vanessa. "Mom," he said, his voice wavering now. "Why does it say Dad isn't my real father?" Boom. Vanessa's whole body jerked like she'd been electrocuted. Her hands shot out, snatching at the paper like she could physically erase the words if she just held them tightly enough. "Oh, sweetie, these tests aren't always accurate," she rushed out, her voice way too high-pitched, way too fake calm. "You know, DNA databases aren't perfect, Anne." "Vanessa." That was Daniel. His tone alone sent an actual shiver down my spine. He was sitting completely still, his beer bottle frozen halfway to his lips, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might snap. And his eyes, they weren't just angry. They were dangerous. "What the hell is he talking about?" he asked. Tyler was still looking at his mother, his hands clutching the paper like it was the only thing tethering him to reality. His face was pale now. "I don't get it," he said. "Why would it say that? What does it mean?" Vanessa let out a breathy, nervous laugh, waving a dismissive hand as if this was all a silly misunderstanding. "Tyler, honey, these tests aren't perfect. There's a margin of error, and sometimes." "Vanessa." Daniel's voice was dangerously low now. She froze mid-sentence, her mouth still open, like a glitching NPC in a video game. "Are you saying the test is wrong?" Daniel asked slowly, his knuckles turning white as he gripped his beer bottle. Vanessa didn't answer. She opened her mouth, closed it. Then, panic mode activated. She let out a forced laugh, waving her hands. "Oh, come on. DNA tests mix things up all the time. It's just a little." "You're lying," Tyler interrupted. His voice cracked on the last word, but his expression? That was pure, undiluted horror. Vanessa's smile was starting to collapse in real time, twitching at the edges, her usual manipulative charm failing her completely. I had never seen her this bad at lying before. And that's when it hit me. She wasn't bad at lying. She was desperately buying time. She knew. She knew that if she kept talking, the truth would eventually have to come out. Tyler took a shaky breath, clutching his DNA test even tighter, his whole body trembling now. "Mom," his voice dropped to a whisper now. "Who is my real dad?" The whole table exhaled at the same time, not relief, but pure, concentrated dread. I turned my head toward Vanessa. I swear I could see her soul actively trying to leave her body. She blinked rapidly, her breathing shallow, her fingers gripping the edge of the table like she was about to fall off the edge of a cliff. And for the first time since I had known her, Vanessa had no way out. The silence stretched so long I could hear the clock ticking from the other room. Tyler's face had gone completely white, his hands still clenched around the DNA results like they might somehow change if he held them hard enough. Across the table, Daniel's jaw twitched, the only sign that he was barely holding himself together. "Mom," Tyler's voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through the air like a knife. Who the hell is my real dad? Vanessa opened her mouth, then snapped it shut. She looked around, like a trapped animal searching for an escape route. Her fingers gripped the edge of the table, her whole body coiled tight like she was either about to bolt or self-destruct. And then, she did exactly what I expected her to do. She lied. "Oh, sweetheart," she cooed, reaching out for Tyler's hand. "These tests aren't always accurate. There are so many little factors, cross-contamination, mixed-up samples, and you know how these companies are." Bullsh*T. Daniel's voice exploded through the room, making everyone jump. His chair scraped back as he stood, his fists clenched so hard his knuckles had turned white. Tyler flinched, still staring at his mother like she'd just told him Santa Claus was a serial killer. Vanessa's smile wavered, the fake, calm reassurance cracking around the edges. She knew. She knew she wasn't going to be able to talk her way out of this. But Daniel wasn't done. "You know what?" His voice was dangerously low now, shaking from barely contained rage. "Let's test that theory. Let's see how wrong these results really are." He grabbed the last unopened DNA envelope sitting on the table, his own. Vanessa's eyes widened in horror. "Daniel, don't. Rip." He tore the envelope open, yanked out the paper, and scanned it. And then I watched as every single ounce of color drained from his face. His hands shook. His chest rose and fell, sharp and uneven. For a second, I thought he might actually pass out. But then, his eyes snapped up to Vanessa, and what came out of his mouth was not a scream. It was worse. His voice was quiet, deadly, and filled with something that made my stomach twist into knots. "Vanessa," he said slowly, "who the hell is Tyler's real father?" The room erupted. Vanessa shot up from her seat, hands waving, her voice high-pitched and frantic. "Daniel, listen, we don't know how these results work. There could be a mix-up, maybe the lab made a mistake. Or. Vanessa." Daniel took a step forward. His entire body was shaking with fury, but his voice was ice-cold. "You lied to me for 16F*ing years." Tyler was still frozen, still staring down at the report that confirmed, without a doubt, that the man he had called Dad his entire life was a stranger. He looked like he might actually throw up. And then, finally, he turned to his mother. "Who is he?" Vanessa's face crumpled. "Sweetie. Who is he?" I flinched at the rawness in his voice, the sheer anguish cutting through it. Vanessa opened her mouth. And then snapped it shut again. Because the thing was, she knew. She always knew. And now? We were about to find out, too. Vanessa was cornered. The air felt thick, suffocating, pressing down on all of us as her eyes darted around the room, looking for any escape. Any excuse. Any way out. But there was nowhere to run. Her husband, Daniel, was shaking with barely contained rage. His entire marriage, his entire fatherhood, his entire life, had just been exposed as a lie. Her son, Tyler, stood frozen, gripping his DNA test so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. He was waiting. Waiting for an answer that would change his life forever. I watched, gripping the edge of the table, knowing that whatever was about to come out of Vanessa's mouth was going to destroy everything. And then, she broke. Vanessa let out a choked sob, her entire body convulsing as she collapsed back into her chair. Her shoulders shook. Her hands covered her face. Her entire world was coming apart. "It was a mistake," she screamed suddenly, her voice cracking. "It happened once. I thought he was yours." Boom. The room exploded. Daniel roared, shoving his chair back so hard it slammed into the wall. Once? You lied to me for 16 years. Tyler's breath was coming too fast, too ragged, like he was barely holding himself together. His eyes were red, but I couldn't tell if it was from anger, sadness, or something worse. You thought, his voice cracked, and he took a step back, like the distance would somehow protect him from the truth. You thought he was Dad's? You weren't even sure. Vanessa sobbed harder, rocking slightly, her entire body trembling. She couldn't even form a full sentence. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, looking like he was about to rip it out. Who the hell is he then? And that was it. That was the question. The one that everyone in that room had been avoiding. Tyler's real father. Vanessa's hands shook violently as she reached for her napkin, her fingers twisting the fabric like she wanted to strangle it. And then, with tears streaming down her face, she slowly lifted her hand. And pointed. At someone sitting at the table. My breath caught in my throat. I turned my head. And saw who she was pointing at. My stomach dropped. Daniel went still. Tyler stopped breathing. The entire room froze in time. Because she wasn't pointing at a stranger. She wasn't pointing at a family friend. She wasn't even pointing at some secret ex-boyfriend from years ago. She was pointing at her own father. Tyler's real father was his own grandfather. And just like that, the last shred of sanity in the room shattered into pieces. I swear, for a solid 10 seconds, no one in the room even breathed. Vanessa's finger, still trembling, remained locked in place, pointing directly at the man who had raised her. At her own father. At Tyler's real dad. My stomach churned so violently I thought I might actually throw up. Tyler was the first to break the silence. His voice was barely above a whisper, but it sliced through the thick, suffocating air like a razor blade to the throat. You're lying. He didn't blink. Didn't move. Didn't even breathe. Just stared at his mother with wide, unblinking eyes, his entire soul unraveling before us. Mom, he said again, his voice hoarse, barely holding itself together. Please tell me you're lying. Vanessa's lip quivered. She shook her head frantically, like she could erase everything that just happened if she denied it hard enough. I didn't know, she sobbed. I swear to God, I didn't know. Daniel let out a sharp, bitter laugh, but there was nothing funny about it. Oh, that's rich, he spat, shoving the table away from him so hard it nearly flipped. So, what? You just, accidentally slept with your own father? You just happened to let him knock you up? Vanessa snapped. I was drunk, she screamed, her voice shattering at the edges. I don't even remember it happening. It wasn't supposed to, I thought it was someone else. And just like that, whatever thin thread was keeping this family together finally snapped. Tyler let out a choked sound, staggering back like someone had just punched him in the gut. His eyes darted wildly between his mother and his grandfather, the man who had held him as a baby, taught him to ride a bike, celebrated his birthdays, played the role of a normal, loving grandparent. Except he wasn't. He was his father. His face was twisting, his breathing coming in ragged gasps, like he was about to either scream or pass out. This isn't real, he muttered, shaking his head over and over like a broken record. This isn't real, this isn't real, this isn't real. I turned my gaze to the grandfather, the walking nightmare at the center of this entire mess. His face was ghostly pale, his lips slightly parted in shock. His hands shook in his lap as he stared back at Vanessa, realization hitting him all at once. Oh, my God, he muttered under his breath, his voice hollow, empty. No, Tyler's voice cracked. No. The grandfather looked up, his eyes full of something I couldn't place. Guilt? Horror? Maybe both. Vanessa, tell me this isn't true, he whispered. Tell me this isn't what I think it is. Vanessa shook her head violently, but she wasn't denying it, just losing herself to panic. Tyler was sobbing now, his hands clenched into fists, his whole body shaking violently. Then he let out a blood-curdling scream and threw the DNA test across the room, sending papers flying in all directions. The entire family exploded into chaos. Daniel was shouting, his voice so full of rage it barely even sounded like words. Vanessa was wailing, trying to grab Tyler, but he ripped away from her, stumbling toward the door, gasping for breath like he was drowning. The grandfather just sat there, frozen, his hands twitching, like he wanted to do something but had no idea what. Relatives started backing away, whispering amongst themselves in pure disbelief. Aunt Carol straight up fainted. And me? I just stood there. Watching. Because what the hell was I supposed to do? This wasn't my war. This wasn't my family. I was just a spectator to the worst train wreck imaginable. And it wasn't over yet. The house was falling apart. Not literally. The walls were still standing, the ceiling wasn't caving in, but the people inside, the family that had gathered here just an hour ago, laughing and eating like they were normal, were crumbling into dust. And all of it, every last bit of it, was because of Vanessa's sick, twisted scheme to ruin my marriage. I turned my head to look at Emily, my wife. She sat frozen in her chair, hands clasped tightly in her lap, eyes locked on some unseen point on the table, like she had mentally checked out of her own body. I could almost hear her thoughts. How did this happen? How did my family turn into this? I wanted to say something, anything, but honestly? What was there to say? Her sister had slept with her own father. Her nephew was also her brother. Her brother-in-law had unknowingly raised another man's child for 16 years. This wasn't something you could slap a Hallmark apology on and call it a day. This was irredeemable. I'm done. Daniel's voice cut through the tension like a blade. We all turned to him. He was standing near the table, his face eerily calm, but his hands were trembling at his sides. He wasn't yelling anymore. He wasn't throwing things. He was just empty. Daniel, Vanessa pleaded, reaching for him, but he stepped back so fast you'd think she had a knife. Don't touch me. His voice was quiet, but the venom in it could have burned a hole through steel. Vanessa flinched like he'd actually hit her. Daniel shook his head, laughing bitterly, but there was no humor in it. Just pain. 16 years, he muttered, mostly to himself. 16 years I raised a son who wasn't even mine. 16 years of lies, of thinking we were a family. His voice cracked, and for a second, I thought he might actually cry. But instead, his face just hardened into something cold. He turned to Tyler. I love you, kid. His voice wavered, just slightly. But I can't do this. I can't be in this house. Tyler, who had been quietly shaking this whole time, finally snapped his head up. His eyes were red, swollen, but his rage had outgrown his sadness. He turned to his mother, his breathing ragged, his fists clenching and unclenching like he was trying not to hit something. Then, with one swift motion, he snatched his DNA results off the table and hurled them at Vanessa's chest. Screw you, Mom. Vanessa gasped, flinching like the papers had physically hurt her. But Tyler wasn't done. You had 16 years to tell me the truth, he spat, his voice thick with betrayal. 16 ******ing years. And instead, I find out like this? Over a stupid DNA test? Because you were too busy trying to ruin Jake's life to even cover your own tracks. Vanessa opened her mouth, but Tyler cut her off. I don't want to hear it. His voice was steel now, low, dangerous. I don't want your excuses. I don't want you to pretend this is some mistake, because it's not. You let it happen. You lied to me. To Dad. To everyone. He turned away, rubbing his hands furiously over his face, trying to breathe through the anger. Then he looked at Daniel. Can I come with you? Daniel didn't hesitate. Of course. Vanessa made a strangled noise, taking a step toward Tyler. Sweetheart, please, she begged, her voice frantic now, her hands reaching out uselessly. I know this is hard, but I'm still your mother. Tyler flinched away from her touch. No, you're not. And with that, he walked toward the door. Daniel followed, and they left without another word. Vanessa let out a broken sob, her hands clutched to her chest like she had just been stabbed in the heart. And then, a low, shaking voice broke through the chaos. Oh God, what have I done? I turned and saw him. The grandfather. His hands were twitching violently in his lap, his face ashen, his whole body looking like it had aged 10 years in the last hour. He was muttering to himself now, his eyes glassy and unfocused. God help me, he whispered. God help me. Vanessa, still sobbing, turned to him. Dad. Don't call me that. The sudden explosion of his voice made everyone jump. His eyes snapped to Vanessa, wild, unhinged, filled with something dark. You ruined everything. His breath shook, his hands clutching at his own arms like he was trying to hold himself together. I never wanted. His voice broke. His face crumpled into something monstrous. And then, just like that, he collapsed into his chair, his chest rising and falling unevenly, muttering those same damned words over and over. What have I done? What have I done? Oh, God, what have I done? And I just stood there, watching this entire family implode in real time, wondering how the hell Vanessa ever thought she was going to ruin my marriage. When she was the one sitting on a ticking time bomb all along. It's been a few weeks since Vanessa's world burned to the ground. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't enjoying every second of it. She wanted to ruin my marriage. She thought she could destroy me, break Emily's trust in me, make herself look like the wise, protective sister, who was just looking out for her. Instead, she blew up her own damn life in the most spectacular way possible. And everyone knew about it. At first, Vanessa tried to play the victim. She called Emily, begged her to take her side, said she had been manipulated by her father, that she was just as much of a victim as Tyler and Daniel were. Emily? She didn't even hesitate. She told her, word for word, I can't believe I spent my whole life defending you. I never want to see you again. And then she hung up. Vanessa tried texting. Then emailing. Then voicemails. One after another, each more desperate than the last. And Emily? She deleted them all without even listening. Vanessa lost her sister that day. And she would never get her back. As for Daniel and Tyler, they went completely no contact. Daniel filed for divorce immediately, wasting no time separating every last piece of his life from Vanessa's. He took the house. He took the car. He took everything he legally could. Vanessa fought, of course she did, but she had no leg to stand on. She had spent 16 years lying to him. And no judge in their right mind was going to let her walk away with a dime more than necessary. Tyler? Oh, Tyler hated her. Not teenage anger. Not temporary rage that would fade with time. Real, raw, unfixable hate. The kind that leaves scars so deep they never heal. He refused to speak to her. He refused to see her. And when Vanessa showed up at his school, sobbing, begging to talk to him, he told the principal she was harassing him. She was escorted off the property and told if she came back, the police would be involved. She lost her son that day. And she would never get him back. But the real cherry on top. The entire community found out. It started small. A whisper here. A rumor there. But within a week, it was everywhere. Vanessa was the talk of every coffee shop, every gym, every dinner party. People she used to gossip with now avoided her like a plague. Moms at Tyler's old school wouldn't look her in the eye. Her so-called friends, the ones who used to eat up her drama, turned on her instantly. Because Vanessa wasn't just messy. She wasn't just a bad wife or a bad sister. She was something worse. And nobody wanted to be associated with her. She had to move out of town. She packed up her ruined, pathetic little life and left, tail between her legs. No husband. No son. No friends. Just humiliation trailing behind her like a rotting stench. And me? I sat back and watched it all unfold. I saw the karma hit her. I saw every lie she ever told come crashing down around her. And I smiled. Because in the end, Vanessa didn't just ruin her own life. She made mine better. Emily and I, stronger than ever. Daniel and Tyler, free from the worst mistake of their lives. And Vanessa? She got exactly what she deserved.